Shalom and welcome. You're listening to Temple Talk from Jerusalem, Israel, a project of the International Department of the Temple Institute. Today, the 9th day of the month of healing, the month of ER 5775. And it is also the 28th day of the month of April 2015. It is the 24th day of the counting of the 7 complete weeks, the counting of the Omer. This week in the land of Israel, we'll be reading the Torah portion of Emor. If you live in the Jewish diaspora, then you will be this week reading the double portions of Acharemot and Kedoshim. Last week, we observed Rosh Chodesh Iyar, all over the world that is, 2-day Rosh Chodesh of the new moon of the month of Iyar, and also we observed the Memorial Day for Israel's fallen soldiers and victims of terror, and, of course, Independence Day, the 67th anniversary of the establishment of the State of Israel. And this week, coming up on Sunday night and Monday, that is to say, the night of the 3rd of May, Sunday night, and Monday the 4th of May, we will be observing, and you may ask, how will we will be observing a biblical festival? Yes, a biblical festival called Pesach Sheni, the second day of Passover. And I would like to speak about that in this broadcast, since our next Temple Talk will be on Tuesday after the event. So we really need to focus on what is the second Passover all about. And in the meantime, at the same time, as we go to Mike here in Jerusalem today, there is a red alert. Siren being heard in the Golan Heights, mortar shell being fired from across the border from Syria into the land of Israel. At the same time, terrible human catastrophe of the earthquake in Nepal, with thousands killed and many missing.
A few hundred Israelis.
Israelis among them.
Some have already been brought back.
Again, a shining example of Israel's first response and Israel's moral feeling of moral obligation to the family of man, to all of humanity. Israel's dispatching of an elite team of rescue workers and IDF coordinators to help with the human situation in Nepal. Plenty of news regarding the Temple Mount as well, and what's been going on there this past week.
There seemed to be a revival of terror this past week. In fact, and Motzei, that means at the end of Independence Day last week, there was a projectile that was fired in from Gaza into Israel, the first in many months. And there have been a spate of attacks, attempted vehicular attacks, where Arab drivers have deliberately run over 3 police personnel last week.
And there was the horrible murder of Rabbi Shirky's son.
The horrible murder, of course, of Rabbi Shirky's son, who was at a bus stop, and he was also deliberately run over, murdered by an Arab who confessed to that crime. And just yesterday, Rabbi, there was a very, very serious incident of a Molotov cocktail being thrown at a vehicle, which was instantly set ablaze, and the driver, within seconds, was able to get himself out and save his life. Can you shed any insight on that?
Amazing story, and actually very, very close to home, believe it or not. Those of our listeners who saw any news articles, especially the one on Arutz Sheva, about this firebomb attack that took place yesterday on Monday, April 27th, in the Samaria area of Israel. The victim was actually none other than my own dear son-in-law, who was driving on a work-related journey. He is actually a mover by profession. He has a very established and popular moving company. He was driving with a small pickup truck outside an Arab village in an area well known to us. And suddenly, a Molotov cocktail was thrown into his vehicle. Those who know this fellow would not be surprised to hear that he actually attempted to grab it and throw it out. He's a paratrooper and quite a brave young man. But within seconds, it ignited. It was a direct hit, and the photographs of the vehicle will send just total chills up your spine. In fact, I was in a very long and important meeting yesterday for many hours as this news was starting to come in on my phone, and for hours we really didn't know what his situation was or where he was or how he was, and it was very, very agonizing. Especially, again, when you see the photographs of the vehicle that was just totally engulfed in flames within seconds and absolutely beyond recognition. And he somehow was able to get out. I don't think he had more than 3 seconds to get out. If you see, again, the photographs of the car, you would not believe that someone could survive. Not only is he okay, but he's actually super okay. He apparently did not require very much medical attention. I think he had a light burn on his hand. And it had been reported in some of the Israeli news outlets that he was in fair to moderate condition, which is a serious code here in Israel. Fair to moderate condition can mean that you lost a limb as well. But he's actually fine. I cannot emphasize how miraculous this is, because actually, according to the plan, he was supposed to have some of the kids with him in the car, that he just went on this short errand. And he says that if they would have been in the car, he never would have been able to unbelt them and extricate them in time. And it was very unlike him, like, to change that plan, because he's a very hands-on father. He takes the kids with him to a lot of places. For some reason, he changed his mind. He didn't have the baby with him, and the rest is history. He was interviewed a great deal today on Israeli media. Some of the more left-wing. Manipulative and cynical left-wing media tried to turn the whole thing on its head and as usual, blame the victims. Why do you people live there? And make the settlers, as it were, always look like the source of all evil. But this is what we go through on a daily basis. This is what the children go through on a daily basis here in Israel. This incredible, murderous intent on the roads. And I'm just very, very thankful to the Holy One, blessed be He, for this tremendous deliverance. It's absolutely a miracle of biblical proportions to think that someone could not only survive an attack like that, but to come out virtually unscathed. And actually, he spent the next few hours in the company of the police and the Secret Service looking for the culprits, and he participated in looking to try to identify them. They took it very, very seriously. He came out of the vehicle, was completely surrounded by an Arab mob, and within about 2 minutes, the security forces got there. And I don't even know what to say, except that it's just amazing to see, like, what Hashem did. It's absolutely staggering.
Rabbi, I think we have another connection.
Actually, some of our Temple Institute followers, friends, supporters might recognize Gedalia, my son-in-law, because he actually played in the starring role of the second of our popular series called The Children Are Ready, which is a series that we make in the summer months on the topic of Jewish mourning and rebuilding of the Holy Temple, just in time for the 9th of Av. And in the second film, which is actually inspired by a true story about my son-in-law and his children. He plays the father in the Beit Knesset, in the synagogue, who was inspired to stop reciting the Lamentations and to get up and leave the synagogue and get ready to build the Holy Temple instead of mourning. That's him. That's Gedalia with his winning smile.
So it's a very strong connection, blood and also digital connection between the Temple Institute and
you know, I want to take this opportunity to to kind of use this as a benchmark or a wake up call for so many people that don't really understand what it is that we're facing here. It's about killing Jews, Again, even the leftist Israeli media, they try to make it sound as if the territories, the so-called occupied territories, the so-called settlements, are the whole problem. And anybody knows that the PLO was founded before 1967. It was in 1964. It's not about Judea and Samaria or the West Bank. It's about all of Israel. It's about the fact that we exist. It's about the fact that we've established a state, and a Molotov cocktail, which is designed to kill, and which fortunately most of the time doesn't, and this time was actually very, very dangerous and a killer, and thrown with accuracy and a direct hit, and exploded almost immediately. It could happen in Tel Aviv. It could happen anywhere. It's not about that area. In fact, as we've said many, many times, as I believe with all my heart, as I am totally convinced in the name of our Holy Torah, the fact that Jews live in these places where they literally live with tremendous self-sacrifice and at tremendous risk, they live there for all of Israel. They live there, and they are a human buffer against the encroachment of this Arab takeover, right? And not only are they there as a human buffer, they're there because it is a wonderful and praiseworthy deed to live in the land of Israel everywhere. They're there for every Jew. And not only that, but if they wouldn't be there, then Jews couldn't live in Haifa or Tel Aviv either. And as soon as the enemy sees that we start to back down and that we lose our will, and that we lose our resolve, in that vacuum is exactly where they creep in and begin to dismantle everything. And that's exactly what they're trying to do now. They're trying to do it on the Temple Mount. Unfortunately, there is a vacuum on the Temple Mount that the government has allowed to exist.
To be filled by terror.
To be filled by terror. And make no mistake, this is terror. And you know what? I gotta say something. Just on a very personal level, call it mystical, call it whimsical, call it quixotic, call it deranged, whatever you want. But I believe that what happens in Israel affects the whole world and will affect the whole world. It's prophetic. The fate of Israel is the fate of mankind. Mankind will be judged by their stand on Israel. And I happen to notice a pattern and the template, and that is that whatever happens here, especially, I'm talking about America, the current administration of America is exercising a very, very diabolical stranglehold on Israel. It's more than throwing Israel under the bus. The deal with Iran is basically like blackmailing Israel to eventually give in. What did I just read this morning? A headline about whoever it was from the State Department expecting Israel to make a pledge, to renew the pledge about the two-state solution, that we're committed to that, after Netanyahu's gaffe implying that he's not committed to it anymore. We have to commit ourselves to it. You know why? Because America is winking at us and saying, we are Iran's ally now. They're our best friend because they're fighting us against ISIS. We're very, very close. And you know what Iran is doing. It's absolutely ridiculous. But that's not what I wanted to say. What I wanted to say is that in this reciprocal relationship on a mystical level, I want you to know that whatever happens here, that America tries to minimize or dismiss or ignore, happens in America. And the classic case that everybody in the world knows about was the fact that, and everybody spoke about this. Everybody spoke about this. The fact that proportionately the exact amount of people who, unfortunately, were rendered homeless by Katrina was proportionally, according to the amount of people that live in Israel, the exact equivalent of the amount of people that were rendered homeless by the expulsion from Gush Katif.
Which took place just weeks before
Katrina, and which was forced upon Israel by America, basically. And so I wake up this morning after this incredibly harrowing night of hours going by where we didn't have contact directly with our son-in-law, not knowing what situation he was in. And again, thank God, it was a total miracle. He's absolutely fine as far as I know. And Looking at those pictures, though, which is what we got first, of looking and seeing that no one could possibly live through an inferno like that, I wake up this morning and I find out that Baltimore, Maryland, is on fire, that the streets of Baltimore are gone to hell, that there is basically an intifada being fought in the streets of Baltimore. From what I understand, is because a drug dealer was died in police custody. What that has to do with pillage and robbery and looting, I have no idea. But apparently, some people feel it's a legitimate form of protest. But yeah, that's exactly what is going on. And the streets of Baltimore look like the streets in many locations here in the land of Israel, what we're up against and what we try to explain, we're up against all the time.
You reap what you sow, kind of thing. We'll leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that.
Should we talk about the Temple Mount?
We can talk about the Temple Mount too. I'm just trying to calm down.
Last Wednesday, it was the morning of Memorial Day in Israel. The rabbi and I and a large group of other Jewish worshipers went up to the Temple Mount. There were many people waiting to go up, and we actually were with a total of 15 people. It was a large group, relatively, for these recent months, these past months. And it was
we
actually
didn't get to talk about this yet, did we? Because
it was actually very quiet, because for some reason we got up there before the screaming, cackling women and men who usually hound and harass us got up there. There was just one man who seemed to have the voice of 1,000 men, who was screaming in our faces at one point.
This was actually the eve of Independence Day.
Yeah,
and we went up there actually to make an Independence Day message, which we did make, and which we posted on Facebook, kind of just like a blessing from the Temple Mount for Independence Day, in which I was interrupted, by the way, by the police from doing. But we also were able to post another extraordinary video that was actually totally historic. Nobody else had ever done it before. We've been telling all of our listeners for years about what goes on the Temple Mount, which is completely supposed to be under the radar. It's because it's completely illegal. We've been talking about what the police do, and finally, we actually were succeeded in recording it.
The actual scene, and of course, this is also a very short video that's on YouTube and on our Facebook page.
It's seconds. It's just seconds long.
The actual scene begins when a Waqf official, meaning a Waqf personnel whose job is to try to read the lips and body movements of Jews and determine whether, in his opinion, they are praying, at which point he will shout, that one's praying, which is exactly what happened. And then the police rush over, and tell that person to stop praying, or else face the consequences, being they'll be arrested and removed from the Temple Mount and be brought into custody, etc., etc., etc. And when it happened this time, and we had the camera running throughout our time on the Temple Mount, when it happened this time, the person was a young girl, actually, I believe, who was accused of praying, and her mother said immediately, but the courts have
made it clear that we are allowed to pray.
We're in our rights, our legal rights to pray, at which point the policeman angrily retorted, the courts can say what they want, but the police have our policy in the Temple Mount, and that's what runs the Temple Mount, etc., etc. And it went back and forth for half a minute, and we have that all recorded translated into English.
The video is actually the title of the video is called Contempt of Court. Police illegally prevent Jewish prayer on the Temple Mount. You can find it further down on our Facebook page, on the Temple Institute's YouTube channel.
And of course, anybody who's been up to the Temple Mount, many people have witnessed this exact scene many times, but this was the first time that it was captured on camera and was posted. It made some of the local websites. I encourage everybody to watch it and share it, because it's very, very important. It hasn't yet gotten the exposure that we would like it to get, because it's really pretty shocking that there's a police force in a democratic country that basically says, in this particular area, we rule, not the courts. And that's pretty scary reality.
And it is the reality, and we have been talking about it for quite some time. We've been trying to analyze and poke it and scrutinize it and understand where it's coming from, and whatever the dynamic is that exists between Israel and Jordan, whatever the reasoning is, there's a very, very idiosyncratic diplomatic immunity that is practiced there. And the victims are the Jews, who more than anything are looking for spiritual identification and the ability to express themselves and their attachment to and dedication to the God of Israel in the only place that really matters. And sounds very romantic. That's the only place that we can't do it in. So absence makes the heart grow fonder, kind of thing. Maybe it's all a plan to get us to pray even harder.
Could be. Those things happened. I mentioned earlier that we happened to be on the Mount before the Hamas and Muslim Brotherhood funded harassment squad got up to make life difficult for us. I don't know how we managed to get up there first, but the next group, after we got off the Mount already, the next group of Jews were met with these people, and became the typical scene that we've all become familiar with of just a madness of screaming and people lunging in your direction. So I guess because of the peace and quiet relative peace and quiet we were able to enjoy, a person was...
What does it mean, enjoy it also? I mean, I want you to know, like, what is it that we're talking about? What is it that we're praying for up there? I mean, you think we're praying for the Third World War? I'm inundated by requests from people, dear people, friends, and people that I don't know, for prayers to pray on the Temple Mount for people that are not well, that need a recovery, that need healing, all sorts of things. And I take those things very, very seriously. We take those prayers to the Temple Mount. We carry them in our heart. We try to pray. So when you read these things about how we've been caught, how we've been accused of praying by the police, or how the Muslim devil guards are monitoring our lips to see if we're praying, I mean, we are actually praying for you and for everybody, and bringing that prayer to the holiest place in the world. So that's what this is all about. So let's not lose our proportion. In the meantime, as we report on the Temple Mount, on the Temple Institute's Facebook page, incitement against the Temple activists continues. Terrible posts that we have there threatening violence against all the Jews who visit there. So the fun and laughter never stop. Stay with us on Temple Talk as we continue. Coming up, Pesach Sheni, mystery of the Second Passover. Right back, Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. Today, the 9th day of the month of ER 5775, the 24th day of April 2015. It's the 28th day of April. It's the 24th day of the counting of the Omer, the 50-day count that leads from Pesach, Passover, up to Shavuot, the festival of the receiving of Torah at Mount Sinai, and more or less in the middle, in another few days, we are going to be celebrating Pesach Sheni, Second Passover, which is, as the Rabbi mentioned, a biblically mandated holiday, sort of an auxiliary holiday, originally intended for those who could not bring a Passover offering in the deserts on Passover because they were tamei met, they had impurity and could not perform the offering. So they went to Moses, and said, "What do we do now? We are part of Israel. We want to be part, and we want to perform the commandment." This is a very beautiful idea being conveyed here, that a commandment's not just a hit or miss thing. If you have the opportunity to do it, these people were determined to do it, to fulfill God's will, and they weren't able to because of circumstances, and they went to Moshe.
Circumstances beyond their control.
And Moshe himself asked the question to God. He said, "What's the answer?"
This whole thing is absolutely mind-boggling for many reasons. First of all, the Passover offering is an offering that is brought at an appointed time. Where else do we find, nowhere else in the Torah do we find an idea that if something wasn't brought in its proper time in the Holy Temple, that there could be a runners-up, a rain check. In fact, there's a whole idea that we read about in the book of Leviticus that if the time went by, then it's over. That's it. You can't do it again. And the Passover offering is all about a particular confluence of time and space, and it's so significant for the very identity of the people of Israel. But like, whoever would have thought of such a thing? So like, where did they get off thinking, well, we weren't ready for it then? Could we do it again? So they come, and they were through no fault of their own. They had been contaminated by death, which is a major impediment to bringing an offering in the temple, because you have to be on a certain level of purity. And some say that they had been the ones that had been carrying Aaron's two sons, Nadav and Avihu, out of the area. Others say that they were carrying the bones of Joseph. In any event, they come forward and they say, what do we do now? And Moshe, instead of saying, like, what are you on? Like, who ever heard of such a thing? Where'd you get such an idea? He says, you know what? Let's stand here and let me find out. And God says, whoa, that's a good idea. Okay, here's what you do. We find it in Parshat Baalotcha, in chapter 9 of the book of Numbers, a little bit later on. Moshe says to them, stand by, and I will hear what Hashem will command you. And then we find Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, if any man will become contaminated through a human corpse, or will be on a distant road, whether you or your generations, Yitzchak. So that means not only then in the desert, but this became a Jewish law for all time. He shall make the Pesach offering for Hashem in the second month, which is, of course, this month, the month of Iyar. On the 14th day, in the afternoon, shall they make it, with matzot and bitter herbs, they shall eat it. And then many of the laws of the Passover offering, they shall not leave over from until morning, nor shall they make a bone of it. Like all the decrees of the Pesach offering shall they make it. But a man who is pure and was not on the road and had refrained from making the Pesach offering, that soul shall be cut off from his people, for he had not offered Hashem's offering at its appointed time. That man will bear his sin. So in other words, this is not an excuse here. This is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. This is not something to take advantage of. If you could have brought it and you didn't bring it, then that's it. And by the way, this, some people say, oh, so maybe we could still bring the Passover offering as a nation on the 14th day of Iyar. Nope. No, thank you for playing. That doesn't work, because it's only for individuals. But the entire nation actually is allowed to bring the Passover offering in a state of impurity. So we could have brought it then and should have brought it then, but couldn't have brought it then because we were prevented from bringing it then. But this isn't about that. This is a separate thing. It's about individuals. But what is it all about? What is this mystery? And it is very, very mysterious and very, very perplexing. Okay, so analyzing this, I understand that there's something about the Passover offering that is so basic, so intrinsic, so essential to the core identity and being of Israel that, yes, Hashem felt, well, you know what? This is different. This is important enough to give you another chance, right? So, chaval, it's a pity that you couldn't have done it in time. So, okay, I'll give you another chance. And thus, there is in the lore surrounding the concept of Passover Sheni, of Pesach Sheni, of the second Passover, in the beautiful literature of our sages throughout the generations, an idea developed that Pesach Sheni, that this day, the 14th day of Iyar, is the festival, the holiday of second chances. And it's a beautiful way of putting it, because that's what it is. Hashem is giving us a second chance. And there are traditions that connect and associate this day with other things. Like, for example, if you recall in the book of Exodus, the end of Parshat Beshalach, after the Song of the Sea, Israel exiting Egypt was attacked by Amalek. Amalek hit Israel in the rear as they were leaving. That event happened on this day, on the second Passover, which is interesting, according to deep thought, because understanding the nature of Amalek, which is the epitome of a spiritual battle, Amalek is all about instilling doubt. We speak about this a lot around Purim time, this analysis of who Amalek is. Amalek has the word Amalek, Ayin Mem Lamed Kuf, has the numerical equivalent of the word Safek, which means doubt. Amalek is all about making a person doubt the righteousness of his own cause, losing self-confidence, feeling, I messed up and I'll never have another chance. So therefore, symbolically, that's the time for them to attack, right? And then Hashem says, no, actually you do have a second chance. Pesach is all about people who don't believe in themselves, when Hashem is saying, you know what? I will give you another chance. It's not too late. But you're not even getting it. I didn't even get to the main thing here, which is the most astounding, powerful idea that you can imagine, which is, well, if it's so important, and Hashem, as it were, not as it were, we see it here explicitly in these verses, Hashem, God himself, acquiesced, went along with, approved of this request, right? How come he waited for it to be Israel's idea? What an incredible mechanism. Where did we find such a thing in the whole Torah of a mitzvah that is being innovated, which becomes like a dioraita, right? It becomes basically a biblically mandated commandment from the mouth of God that he just happened to be waiting for it to be our idea. But the more that you think about it, the more that you realize, wow, it's so perfect. The beauty of this idea where God says, yeah, I'll give you a second chance, but you have to take it. It has to be your idea. You have to want it. I can't make you want it. I can't make you decide that I have to have this. I have to live for God. I have to prove myself. I have to do the mitzvah. He can't throw me out. I have to attach myself to God. You have to. And so the whole iconography of this mitzvah is so staggeringly beautiful. How these people came to Moshe and they, from the bottom up, right? From the bottom up, changed the face of Torah by their initiative. And God, so to speak, was just waiting for that to happen. It's just mind-boggling that what this means, that he is giving us a second chance, that he is agreeing the power of this opportunity, but that, and of course it's about Passover because of everything we discussed way back in Nisan about what the Passover offering means, about how Israel's destiny and Israel's mandate in the world is to slaughter idolatry and to stand up for freedom and to stand up for what it really means to be a servant of God. So God says, I wouldn't want anybody to be left out of that. You're part of the nation. Your souls are connected. And you missed it. Well, you missed it. So you could have said, I missed it. Too bad for me. Or you could say, I can't live like this. I can't live without this. So then how come God didn't say originally, and by the way, if you couldn't have made it because you was no fault of your own, you were tameh, you were contaminated, I'll give you a second chance. No, he had to say, let's see if they come up with this. And then it's so breathtaking to read these verses where Moshe says to Israel, stand and I'll hear what he instructs me. And then he says, speak to the children of Israel, saying, and then Hashem gives over to Moshe the whole instruction. So clearly, he was just waiting for Israel's input.
And this is so relevant, I think, to our era in history, because we live in the era of second chances. The nation of Israel, the state of Israel today, is a second chance that the people of Israel demanded, we're going to do this. And of course, we received God's blessing. I was just telling you earlier in the week, Rabbi, about this horrible interview I read with a local celebrity who was being asked about the Temple Mount and should, Jews go up to the Temple Mount and building the Holy Temple. And he said, no, you know what? We had our chance in 67. We were nice, and we turned the administration over to the Waqf. And so, you know what? That's it. We have to wait till God decides that we're good little children again. But this is the opposite of that. This is, we're saying to God, the people who go up to the Temple Mount, the people who are listening to this program are saying, God, whatever we did then, we want that second chance. We demand that second chance now. And you know what? I think God is ready to grant everyone a second chance if they believe in that, if they believe in themselves and believe that they can do it, that God is it's with God's blessing. Of course, God wants to give everyone a second chance if what they're asking for is the ability to walk in God's way and to express God's will as He's intended for us.
And last week, I think it was, we were talking more about the whole nature of the month of Iyar, how it's a time of healing because of the manna that fell down during this time, and how physical element is associated with food, how it's a time of intense and taut anticipation because it's totally taken up with the counting and preparation for the Sinai revelation, receiving the Torah again. So you've got the element of anticipation and preparation and healing. And all of those things meet and mesh so beautifully in our month of Iyar, which of course stands for Ani Hashem Rofecha. I am Hashem who heals you. And as you pointed out, Yitzchak, last week, Iyar, Aleph Yud Yud Resh, is also a derivative of Aleph Vav Resh, which is light, and indeed the biblical name for the month, which we find in the book of Kings, chapter 6 and verse 1, is Ziv, which also means radiance. And all that radiance comes from the spiritual rectification and work that's being accomplished and that's being toiled at this month. And how fitting that in this month of healing and preparation and anticipation we have the State of Israel established, because that is hopefully the basis, framework, infrastructure for healing and anticipation and preparation for the restoration of Hashem's name in the world. And the crescendo, the total apex of the month, is Pesach Sheni, which is the embodiment of all of these things together: preparation and anticipation and healing and lights. And the more that we understand about the significance of getting a second chance, the more we can appreciate the whole structure of the month of Iyar. But again, the bottom line is that the second chance, we had to come up with the idea and ask for it. And even in that, like God is saying, it's a very, very good idea. And of course I want to give you a second chance, but you have to want it. You have to want it. It's not worth anything if I have to tell you to do it. And I think that's just very extraordinarily representative of our relationship with God and what He expects from us and what we can accomplish, and of a healthy mindset. He expects us to act, and it's the same thing. It's no different. Our struggle for freedom on the Temple Mount. It's the same thing when it comes to the concept of the rebuilding of the Holy Temple. He expects us to act, and honestly, it's the same thing when it comes to the first thing that we were discussing today: the struggle to live in the land of Israel and reclaim the land. It basically is up to us. It's in our hands, and Hashem is expecting us to act. Nothing ever is just given over on a silver platter, automatic. And there are so many people in the world that think that the temple is going to come down from heaven, and Mashiach is going to come and roll out the red carpet, and you're all going to come in your Cadillacs, and it doesn't work like that. That's not what life is all about. It's about working hard and making something happen, because we are human beings, and in our very humanity, God revels. This is what He loves. This is why He created us this way. And I think that this month of Iyar is just the embodiment of that whole idea. And in fact, in taking it onto the level of the Torah portion, again, it's all about the principles of holiness. It's all about elevating life on every level by everything being special, by that which is significant to be recognized as being significant. And that makes a mark. I don't want to go too far here because I want to save something for our video this week, but that makes a mark on all the dimensions, whether it's time or space or substance. Everything can be altered and changed and elevated with a stamp of holiness.
And as we've been studying the book of Leviticus these past weeks, we know the book of Leviticus really focuses on the concept of holiness, kedusha, to be kadosh, which is to distinguish yourself in this world, to separate yourselves from the mundane, to separate yourself basically from the philosophy of Amalek, which is nothing's holy, nothing means anything, nothing's important. You can't be distinct from things and distinguish yourself if nothing means anything to begin with. And so, again, the utmost height of holiness is those men who went before Moses and said, we want to distinguish ourselves. We weren't able to. We're not giving up on this. This is what we want.
If I could take a jump here, that's what we're doing in Nepal. It really is, because life is so holy to the Jewish people. Even as we are under attack, daily attack, right? Life-threatening, incredible, audacious attempt to just totally destroy the Jewish people, whether it's the northern border or the almost daily vehicular attacks that are designed to kill and that many times do and unfortunately have. What do? We're off to Nepal, sending our very, very best and finest to save human lives. It's not about the couple of hundred Israelis that are there. It's about the thousands of people that are homeless. And that's what Israel does. Even as we are so totally, our government is so totally apparently deaf or, insensitive or I don't know what, when it comes to what's holy to us, the Temple Mount and the destiny of the Jewish people and our identity as Jews and what we stand for in the world here in the land. Well, we know what our government's attitude is about that, but at least at the same time, we go off to Nepal, and it's a shining example of the fact that Israel treasures and cherishes humanity, and Israel will do everything it can for anybody else, as long as you're not Jews in Israel that want to go up on the Temple Mount. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be so cynical, but the fact is, it is very, very beautiful, and I think that just as those men came before Hashem in the desert and said to Moshe, we don't want to be left out, we want to act, we want to stand up for Hashem's honor. That's why we go to Nepal. That's why we do the things that we do, because we do care, because everything is holy, because life is holy, and I think it's just I think seeing the Israeli contingent go to Nepal is the Torah come alive. It really is.
And it's something that's ma'asi. It's something that's actual. It's not mystical. It's not a magical thing. Holiness. It's not some ethereal concept that someone on the top of a hill, a mountaintop, no pun intended. So we're talking about Nepal and Mount Everest. Can unite with God in contemplation. A very beautiful concept. Maybe some people can do it, but the holiness that Torah stresses is the holiness of action, the holiness of making a difference in this world, like you said, Rabbi, cherishing humanity and improving it.
And because Hashem can be in this world if we let Him in. That's what the Holy Temple is all about. That's what Iyar is all about. That's what the establishment of the State of Israel is all about. And that brings to mind an incident from the end of this week's Torah portion that we never fail to mention every year because it's so powerful and it delivers this iconography in the most profound way. And that's the whole idea of the blasphemer. Mm-hmm. That was just to publicly cursing the name of God, and there's a whole question about what exactly was it that he said. This man who had to be put to death because he was deliberately trying to unseat God, and there is a tradition that because the incident in chapter 24 and verse 10 of this blasphemer follows closely the instructions of baking the showbread, there's a tradition in the name of one Rabbi Barachia that comes from the Midrash that his scoffing was about the showbread, and that he was going around saying a king normally eats warm, freshly baked bread. Why would God have old, cold bread in the tabernacle? And of course, we know, as our sages relate, that the bread in the tabernacle, on the table, and in the holy temple did stay hot and fresh all week long, which, whether or not it was a miracle, is representative of the fact that Hashem's presence is in this world. But I think, what did he mean by that? Like, does God want, you think God wants your old, cold bread? I think what he's really trying to say is, like, God doesn't want to be in this world. He doesn't care about this world. It's going to get old and cold, because that is Amalek. That is the spirit of Amalek. And the truth is, that's the greatest mockery and scoffing of God of all, because he does love this world. And that's what the state of Israel is all about. That's why we want to build the temple, because this is the place.
And that, my friends, is the end of this week's Temple Talk. We've had so much to say, we just ran out of time before we could finish everything. Thank you so much for being with us. Again, this coming Sunday night, Monday, Pesach Sheni, Second Passover, Festival of Second Chances. Everybody, take advantage. Take advantage of your second chance. Thanks for being with us. Temple Talk.